Good evening. A warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us on the News on 90 International. We're live in Abuja. I'm Ruth Aguela. Let's start with the headlines. Edo State Governor and his deputy Philip Shaibu resigned from All Progressives Congress. Ondo State Governor Rotimi Akeredolu visits President Buhari, seeks blessings for second-term bid. Plus, Nigeria loses 27,000 pigs as African swine fever hits 3 states. We'll begin from the political scene. The embattled governor of Edo State, Godwin Obaseki, has formally resigned his membership of the governing All Progressives Congress. The governor made his decision known while briefing State House correspondents. Adamu Sambo reports that Governor Obaseki was not, however, granted audience by the president. The governor was recently disqualified from participating in the forthcoming APC governorship primary election due to what the governing party called discrepancies in his credentials.
I'm sure the whole country knows and is aware of what has gone on with me and the party chairman and party leadership, which culminated in my disqualification as a gubernatorial aspirant. And upon that unfortunate decision by the chairman of the All Progressive Congress, I'm just here today to inform you that I have now decided formally to resign my membership of the All Progressive Congress. Having done that, I will now announce in the next few days my specific line of action and what platform I will be contesting the gubernatorial elections on.
Nigerians may like to know, why have you decided to come to the State House to make this your decision known?
I said that before I make a decision, I have to show respect to my president, who I adore, who for me is an epitome of incorruptibility, an epitome of order, an epitome of lawfulness. This is a man who, for him, that is what Nigeria should be about. I think I owe him that respect to come and tell him what I have done and why I have decided to take the decision I took.
Meanwhile, Edo State Deputy Governor Philip Shaibu has also announced his resignation from APC at the Government House in Benin. And in the meantime, Governor Rotimi Akeredolu of Ondo State is seeking the blessings of President Muhammadu Buhari as he seeks the renewal of his mandate for his second term of office. The governor stated this while briefing newsmen after an audience with the president. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo again has these details.
Governor Rotimi Akeredolu was in the State House to formally inform President Muhammadu Buhari of his intention and desire to recontest in the forthcoming Ondo State governorship election.
Having obtained the expression of interest and nomination form, I decided to let the president know of the fact that I will be contesting election again, and that I pray God Almighty that I will be successful, and that I needed His blessing.
The Ondo State Governor told newsmen that his chances of flying the governing party's flag once more and indeed winning the election are very bright.
Direct, indirect, Aketi is a goal. We will win. In office for over 3 years, easily for me, I've done reasonable work in Ondo State, and it is there for everybody to see. It's not something that is hidden. We've gone on the issue of infrastructure, we've gone on our schools, we've gone on the universities, we have gone everywhere. You remember the president visiting Ondo Industrial Hub. That is a monumental achievement, and he has said to me pointedly, you have done very well in Ondo State. That can go for the president supporting you.
Ondo State governorship election comes up on the 10th of October this year, while the first term tenure of office of Governor Akeredolu expires on February 23rd, 2021. From the State House, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
Let's look at education. The Joint Admission and Matriculation Board has pegged minimum national cut-off marks for admissions into universities in Nigeria at 160. Cut-off marks for polytechnics 120, while colleges of education and innovative enterprise and institute entry marks is 100. The decision was taken at the 2020 policy meeting on admissions into tertiary institutions in Nigeria in Abuja. Olayinka Ojo has that report.
In this hall are decision makers in the nation's tertiary institutions, and the decision taken here will determine the fate of more than 1.9 million candidates seeking admission into universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, and innovative enterprising institutes. The lead decision maker at the policy meeting is the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, JAMB. JAMB's registrar's remark was eagerly waited for by the heads of institutions and the anxious candidates whose minds were following the virtual meeting, even though they are not physically present.
Universities will have minimum score points of UTME as decided by each of the universities. For the polytechnics and the colleges of education, it's also as decided by each of the institutions, except that no institution will be allowed to admit a candidate for universities if he has scored less than 160.
While some tertiary institutions are found wanting in the admission process, another major decision reiterated by the Minister of State for Education is strict adherence to the use of Central Admissions Processing System CAPS during admission.
No admission offer should be made to any candidate outside the Central Admission Processing System CAPS. These institutions during admission outside central admission processing systems are endangering our system and confusing our candidates.
With the pronouncement of the 2020 UTME cut-off marks, the date for the commencement of admission is to be announced soon. Olayinka Ojo, NTA News.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the appointment of 12 new permanent secretaries in the Federal Civil Service. The head of service of the Federation, Dr. Folashade Yemieson, who made this known in Abuja, said the appointed federal permanent secretaries cut across 12 states. The swearing-in and deployment will be announced in due course. Now let's go to update on COVID-19. Nigeria has lost a total of 424 persons to COVID-19 as the wife of Ukraine's president hospitalized following coronavirus infection. Adebola Brookslyn Sunday has a global update.
Nigeria now has 10,885 active cases of coronavirus. This is after the recovery and discharge of 5,349 persons, 424 deaths, while the total number of confirmed cases stands at 16,658, as published by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC. Meanwhile, the Africa Center for Disease Control says the continent now has a total of 251,866 cases of COVID-19, with 6,769 deaths and 114,308 recoveries. And on the COVID-19 Resource Center of Johns Hopkins University dashboard at about 6:50 p.m. local time, 8,160,996 persons have been infected with coronavirus globally. 440,387 deaths, while 4,263,462 people have recovered from the virus. New Zealand's Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says 2 women who arrived in the country from Britain have tested positive for coronavirus. Ashley Bloomfield said the pair were released early from government quarantine and permitted to drive from the city of Auckland to the capital Wellington before being diagnosed or even tested, and that the women had done everything right and had not put other members of the public at risk. The pair mark New Zealand's first new cases of COVID-19 for more than 3 weeks of no case in the country. The wife of Ukraine's President Olena Zelenska has been hospitalized after contracting the novel coronavirus. The presidential office said her condition is stable. Last week, Zelenska said she had tested positive for COVID-19, while her husband, Volodymyr Zelensky, and their 2 children tested negative.
The global updates there, and still more arising from COVID-19. The Lagos State government has suspended planned reopening of churches and mosques indefinitely as a result of the rising cases of COVID-19 in the state. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, at a news briefing on update of COVID-19, assured residents that government will continue to base its decision-making on data modeling to ensure the protection of lives and property. Governor Sanwo-Olu, who expressed gratitude to those at the front lines of the response to the pandemic in the public and private sectors, urged residents to continue to obey government's COVID-19 directives as community transmission is on the increase. Nosa Osula reports that the government had planned to reopen the worship centers on Friday this week, which was supposed to be June 19. Let's talk agric. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture has confirmed the outbreak of African swine fever in the country. Chief Veterinary Officer of the Federation, Olaniran Alabi, in an exclusive interview with NTA, says steps are being taken by the government officials to curtail and stop the spread of the disease. Let's hear from Musa Baba Aliyu.
In the last few weeks, we are beginning to record increases in the number of outbreaks, which of course is not peculiar to Nigeria.
The African swine virus was first noticed in Lagos State in a farm located at Okearo, affecting more than 20,000 pigs. The virus later spread to Ogun and Abia states. Even though it is not the first time Nigeria is experiencing the outbreak, however, farmers are afraid that this time around it will be hard on their socioeconomic well-being. The Chief Veterinary Officer of the Federation says the disease is harmless to humans, but can kill pigs within few days.
The disease has no vaccination. There's no vaccine for it. So the best control for African swine fever is putting in place a very good biosecurity program, which of course most of these farmers will have tried in several ways to create awareness on how to put biosecurity on their farms to prevent African swine fever.
The federal government has already deployed her veterinary officers with a view to curtail the spread of the disease. In Abuja, Musa Baba Aliyu, NTA News.
And following that development, we have in the studio Chief Veterinary Officer and Epidemiologist, Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Dr. Peter Umana. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good evening,
right.
Viewers.
Okay, now this outbreak of swine fever in Nigeria, how serious would you say is this disease? Is it zoonotic?
Well, thank you very much. African swine fever, in its current outbreak, is quite serious. The African swine fever is very severe and highly, pathogenic and hemorrhagic fever of domestic and wild pigs. It spreads very rapidly from pig to pig and can also be spread through materials that have been in contact with infected or dead animals. And so it's very, very severe. It's a notifiable disease because its impact cuts across international boundaries. So it's a transboundary animal disease. So it's very, very severe infection.
Okay, we hear that more than 20,000 pigs have been affected. How vibrant is the piggery subsector of agriculture, and how would this outbreak affect its development?
The pig industry in Nigeria is quite vibrant, especially between the north-central region and the southern region of the country. Many people have caught the pork culture, and the consumption has increased tremendously. So also the has grown. To assess the vibrancy, just take a case of the current outbreak in a farm that the Chief Veterinary Officer of Nigeria has already mentioned, the Okeado farm at Lagos. That farm estate has over 2,000 farmers there into primary production. And if they're into primary production and you're looking at the secondary economic impact of their activities in terms of marketing, processing, and other things, you will see that the pig industry is quite robust and very vibrant. Already, Nigeria has a very big market for pork, and over 60% of pig produced in the country is consumed locally. 30% is exported to neighboring countries, and the value of that export is placed at over 3 billion naira annually. So the pig industry is quite vibrant.
Okay, so I know that the ministry have already swung into action, but what measures specifically have been put in place to curtail the spread of the outbreak?
Thank you. Like you've heard mentioned by the Director of Various Services, anytime we receive an outbreak, we activate our disease investigation and containment team in each of the states in the areas that are affected, and they work with the state veterinary services to carry out immediate investigation of the disease and institute containment measures. That is what we have done in current disease outbreak, and in those states we've supported the states with disinfection materials. We've working with the state ministries of agriculture, commence and continuing sensitization of farmers with respect to biosecurity measures to institute, how to dispose of dead animals, and how to prevent further spread. Okay. Also to restrict movement restrictions so as to prevent movement of sick and contaminated items from farm to farm. Right. Those are the things that the ministry has done. Okay. The ministry also, within the period, in each of the zonal offices, we have in place response vehicles that we have used to support any state for immediate, reaction. So that anytime there's a place, you can pick a vehicle from any from the zonal offices and quickly support the state that is affected in investigation
I'm afraid that's where I will leave it. Thank you very much. The good thing is that it's not transmissible to humans, but all the best with the work. Let's go on a break. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
We have observed the lockdown. We have practiced the measures in order to curb the spread of the virus, but we can do better. The coronavirus spread is increasing daily, and only together can we cut down the numbers and defeat the spread of the virus. Remember, COVID-19 is not a death sentence, and a recovered patient cannot spread the disease. Do not stigmatize. Do not hesitate to report any case, or if you have come in contact with anybody that has been infected with COVID-19. If you have cough and fever, please stay at home and call your state hotline. Find state numbers at www.covid19.ncdc.gov.ng. Remember, it is for your own good and for the good of every Nigerian. Let us do better and defeat the virus. Together, we can do this. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Thanks for staying tuned. Let's look at the Day of the African Child as Nigeria joins the international community to celebrate the Day of the African Child. President Muhammadu Buhari has pledged the commitment of government to protect children from sexual violence, domestic abuse and exploitation. The president also reiterates that his administration will continue to ensure that every Nigerian child has access to quality and affordable education by promoting free and compulsory basic education for the first 9 years of schooling. A presidency statement says President Buhari expresses concern on the recent spate of sexual and physical violence on the girl child and directs relevant government agencies to scale up support for victims of violence and ensure that those who have infringed on their rights face the full weight of the laws. The president recognizes that this year's commemorative activities with the theme Access to a Child-Friendly Justice System in Nigeria have moved online due to global COVID-19, the pandemic. And in the meantime, the First Lady of Nigeria, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, has identified also with the Nigerian child on the occasion of this year's International Day of the African Child, urging them to adhere to the protocol of COVID-19 of stay-at-home order and dedicate their time in reading educative and informative literature. The First Lady stated this in a message during an event to commemorate the Day of the African Child. State House correspondent Aliyu Kabir has the report.
The Day of the African Child is being celebrated on June 16 every year since 1991. It is initiated by the Organization of African Unity, now African Union. It is aimed at raising awareness of the continuing need for improvement of the education of African children. This year's theme, Access to a Child-Friendly Justice System in Africa, is a renewed commitment of the African First Lady's Peace Mission, supported by the Nigeria's First Lady, towards improving the plight of the African child, particularly with the current coronavirus pandemic. This is in addition to addressing different abuse faced by the African children, ranging from rape, trafficking, and child labor, among others.
In accordance with this year's theme, a child-friendly system of justice acknowledges that children have their own legal rights and interests and recognize the authority of the child's representative in legal proceedings. Many children in Africa that need legal aid live in remote rural communities. As a result, these children often find it impossible to physically access legal services. To overcome this barrier, some legal aid providers have developed creative ways of taking legal assistance to their clients. These initiatives include mobile clinic and one-stop over center.
The Day of the African Child 2020 is taking a very radical approach to commemorating this event by going virtual. You could recall that every year we have over 300 children celebrating with us in this hall. But because of COVID-19, we had to do it this way.
While calling on children to speak out against any inappropriate behavior towards them, the First Lady employed relevant authorities across Africa to provide friendly services to children, such as free 24-hour helplines, child-friendly complaint services, as well as child offenders court and free legal advice for juveniles, among others. In Abuja, Aliu Kabir, NTA News.
And to speak further on the African Day of the African Child, joining us in the studio is the Deputy Director of Child Development, Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, Ali Andrew Madugu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, the theme for this year's celebration states access to a child-friendly justice system. Now, how would you relate this with the increasing